lights on.
Hey Gary.
Hey Steve, how are you today?
I'm good. Talking about our favorite topic. At least it is for me. I think it is for you too, since you wrote a book about it.
Well, yeah, and it goes way deeper than that. I mean, 25 years of research, 2,200 books, all about happiness, because there's 7 billion people on the earth, and all 7 billion people appear to be searching for the same thing, happiness. And they're doing it in 1,000 different ways, most of which don't bring them the end result they're looking for.
So you came up with a formula, and you detailed this formula on page 124 of your book by the same name, The Happiness Formula. Let's go right into that formula.
Well, the whole thing behind the formula was, I was sitting in my office one night, and I went, you know what? I after 25 years of interviewing people all over the world and asking them very specific questions about happiness, I went, you know what? I'm going to do something very unique. I'm going to put it in the context of the periodic table, because, you know, then I had a hat made, I had it embroidered on the hat, and the whole idea was to see how many people would ask me. Okay.
Yes.
So it was kind of, it was a marketing test of sorts.
And people asked you, because I've been out with you, and people ask you that.
Literally, the 5 years that I've been doing the hat, and I'm probably way underestimating, 10,000 people have asked me what the formula means. And it's pretty much daily. If I'm wearing the hat, somebody's asking me what the formula means. It's not gender specific, it's not age specific, it's not country specific. It happens everywhere I go. They want to know the formula. And the other part of it is, I was paying attention to whether the people that I explained the formula to were passive or they were fully engaged in the explanation. And I can tell you, the 5 years I did it, no one was ever passive when I was explaining what the formula meant. So that's kind of a quick background of the why I would take a piece of information and put it in the context of the periodic table. But the main reason behind doing that is, it is very specific. So when I give a person a piece of information and it is specific, it's not a bunch of these 20 steps and these 14 steps and you got to do this and you got to practice that. It's very specific. It has to do with 3 very specific core issues of all human life. They are core issues. So that's why I did it like that.
So the first part of the formula, the first letter of the formula is F squared.
So it's actually F
to the second power.
Well, there's 2 parts. It's like H2O. If it were squared, the 2 would be up at the top, just for clarity's sake. When the 2 is down at the bottom, it's like H2O. 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. So the F stands for forgiveness, and forgiveness has 2 parts. And before I go any farther, I want to give everyone complete clarity. The 3 elements of the happiness formula are skills. They are skills. They are not accidental. It is a skill. You must develop it and you must practice it, not unlike any other skill. Okay? Computer repair is not accidental. Brain surgery is not accidental. It is a skill. So forgiveness is a skill. You weren't born with it. Generally speaking, you weren't taught it in school. And generally speaking, it is not a generated impression that you see day by day, either in entertainment or television or news or schools. It is not a generated impression. So it's a skill, and you learn it and you practice it until you get really good at it.
Yeah, no kidding, because there's a lot of things going to test us on being able to do that.
That is absolutely correct. So yes, it's a skill. And so the second part, which is also a skill, the second part is HT2.
Before you do that, I want to clarify the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because the forgiveness means forgiving yourself and forgiving others.
That's correct. And I can tell you from experience of 25 years of interviews, it is very perplexing, if not in some cases impossible, for people to forgive themselves and other people. They make it impossible because they'll tell me things like, you don't understand the set of circumstances as to why I can't or won't forgive myself or another person. And the clarity in that is, if somebody has betrayed you, they have physically abused you, they've sexually abused you, they have stolen a lot of money from you. The common thought with people who do not or refuse to forgive is that they're poisoning the other person for their betrayal. So they're poisoning the offender. Well, the challenge with that is they are not poisoning the offender, they're poisoning themselves is what they're doing. And most people don't understand that, because first you have to grab hold of the skill part. It's a skill. You have to learn it, you have to practice it, you have to practice it. It's just like anything else. You develop a skill, whether it's playing a sport, you're going to make a lot of errors before you start getting it right. Well, that's how forgiveness is. And it's interesting because people, my experience in interviewing people is no one has ever considered forgiveness a skill. Nobody's ever considered it a skill.
You never hear that it's a skill.
That's correct.
You just hear it's something that you do.
That's right.
So I want to interject something here on the forgiveness point, because it's something that really helped me a long time ago. And that was reading the guidance that sometimes things happen, and as an individual, let's just use me, say I have trouble forgiving someone else for what they did.
Correct.
Okay? So I'm in this state that I'm having trouble. Okay, I want to do it, I'm practicing the skill, but it's not flowing for me yet. So the guidance that I read from an author that I really like was that you turn to God, the universe, and say, do this for me until I'm able to do it myself. And that was like really, really cool guidance.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big world. There's somewhere around 5,000 religions on planet Earth, and most of them have their basis in three things, and one of the three things is forgiveness. It is not easy to do. It isn't easy to forgive someone else. Of course, it's contextual, right? There are minor offenses and there are major offenses. And that's the same with forgiving yourself. There are minor offenses and there are major offenses.
So you mentioned something earlier, and before we move on, I'd like to pause on this point. And that is, if we don't do this, okay, if we don't do this, if I'm not forgiving myself and I'm not forgiving others that I need to forgive,
Yes.
the only person, the only hurt that's being done is the harm to me. And it's a physical harm.
That's correct.
Not-
Self-destructive.
Self-destructive.
And here's where that self-destruction goes. Not alone does it affect your ability to feel happiness and joy, but it affects your ability to have any kind of healthy relationship. Because just think about this. If you don't develop the skill of forgiveness, how in the world will you have a quality relationship with another person? Because at some point, you are going to have to forgive the other person, because it is the nature of relationships that there's three very common things that happen that generate the need for forgiveness. One of them is unrealistic expectations. Another one is missed expectations, and another one is perceived obligations, all right, that are all built into this thing we call a relationship. And if you don't learn the skill, how could you possibly have a quality, thriving, growing, expanding relationship? Well, the simple answer is you can't. You can't do it. I mean, that is why it goes back thousands of years. It's a foundational part of human life. Forgiveness is something that you develop it into a skill, and then I could take it a step farther and go, depending on what your belief system is, I could take it a step farther and go, well, you keep repeating this process till you learn the skill, okay? So however you want to run that through your filter, you keep coming back until you get it right, okay? So you keep returning, excuse me, till you get it right.
So tying this into relationships is very, very fascinating because, you know, in today's world we have different points of view that people categorize as being on the right or being on the left, and depending on which side you're on, there can be a whole lot of let's say aggravation. So let's just say that I'm, you know, I take my position and I look at somebody's opposite of that. If I am not forgiving myself and forgiving them and just accepting for what is, then what happens to me is I become more caustic. Now, if I become more caustic as a person, you know, people like Gary King's not going to let us spend any time with me. You know, so
well, we've taken political correctness and we've taken it so far out of practical context. You know, people ask me, what do you do? I teach practical wisdom. I'm not a life coach. I teach practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is the thing that guides you through your life and allows you to see what works and what doesn't, rather than getting caught up in doing what the masses are doing. You reside outside the masses based on wisdom. But you know, the old saying goes, great wisdom comes from great pain. And what do most people want to
avoid?
Want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, exactly.
Great pain.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, forgiveness is essential. And what's interesting about the subject of forgiveness, now, I worked in the personal development industry and I spent a lot of time in it, not just in the environment I worked in, but I went to many other people's programs, and forgiveness is not something that is generally taught in motivational seminars. Now, let me give you clarity. This is my perception of motivational versus inspirational. Motivational seminars tend to be driven by your brain and doing something, taking action, taking massive action, and being fearless. All right, that's typically an overview of motivational seminars. Now you have inspirational seminars, and what is behind an inspirational seminar is not going out and doing, it is going out and being.
Yep.
Okay, that's the difference.
Excellent.
So in an inspirational seminar, hopefully you learn to go out and be forgiving rather than taking action to create something, a financial outcome or something.
So one of the guys that we talked about as being very inspirational for both of us is the late Wayne Dyer.
Absolutely.
Totally amazing, inspirational person.
No question.
Great example.
Great example. Never heard him addressed as a motivational speaker. He was a storyteller. He was very grounded. It was not what they now currently call, they've changed the whole name. There's a big name change in personal development now, and it's called, the word entertaining is in it. So it's a combination of learning and entertainment.
Oh.
And that was not That was not what Wayne Dyer did. And there were numerous other speakers.
Yeah, there are. But,
that-
but
that-
a lot of people know who he is.
Yeah, I mean, Wayne is sorely missed. I believe he gave up his life at 76 years old, which is
Pretty early.
relatively young. That's early.
Yeah, pretty early.
And one of the really interesting things that I really respected about Wayne Dyer, he wrote 46 books. I believe his last one was I Can See Clearly Now, which I read.
Yeah.
And what I really respected about Wayne was the fact that he wrote about going through a divorce that was very difficult for him, and that for 1 year he was incapacitated by that divorce. And see, that told me that he was vulnerable, and he was making his vulnerability public. He was announcing the fact that he was in a lot of pain and he was vulnerable. And being in pain and being vulnerable is an asset, not a liability. I posted the other day, I posted people who over project invincibility. Typically what they're doing is they're projecting insecurity when they over project invincibility. It's actually them exposing their insecurity.
So there's a couple other parts to the formula. Maybe we ought to.
Yeah, we should move forward. So the second part of the formula is HT2. Now the H stands for honest and the T stands for truth. And the idea is you have to be honest with yourself. And currently we're in an age where being honest with yourself is kind of, it doesn't happen very often. There's an awful lot of people in denial. There's an awful lot of people who don't want to see what they see. They don't want to hear what they hear. And statistically, the statistics are all over the board. You can Google it. These are not Gary King's statistics. These are statistics taken off the internet. So, current statistic. The average person lies 10 to 200 times per day. Now I want to put that in a context for you so you're clear on the context. Lying to yourself, you understand what that is, all right? Now, there's a thing called a withhold. That's when you're asked a direct question and you withhold the truth. You skirt it. You go around it, all right? And then what you have is a white lie, which there's no such thing as a white lie. I mean, you're either telling the truth or you're lying. And then you've got pathological liars, which it becomes a pathology. It becomes part of their makeup. And when I designed the 24-hour truth challenge, of course, that was the great exposure. And I designed that 14 or 15 years ago. And I was just at, this past 5 days, I was at a mastermind seminar. There was a plastic surgeon there, a very well-known plastic surgeon. And when it was his time to speak, this is how impactful the 24-hour truth challenge is. I did not recognize him by name. I did not recognize him by looking at him. But one of the first things he said was, I want to thank Gary King for changing my life with his 24-hour truth challenge. I had no idea how that happened, and then I found out later that many years before he had been in a presentation that I did, and I always end it with the 24-hour truth challenge. So the reason I bring it up now is because it's probably one of the most powerful things that you could ever do to learn more about yourself in a 24-hour period than you've ever learned about yourself before in 24 hours. You'll learn why you lie, how much you lie, how ridiculous most of your lies are, how many autoresponders you do. It's an auto response. It's not even thought through. And then, of course, there's the big part, which is situational honesty. People are not, they haven't predetermined their honesty. So it's situational. Every situation they have to think it through. What's my upside? What's my downside? And then they make a decision.
So as a quick guidance, is it accurate to just decide for the next 24 hours, I'm going to watch everything I say and do and make sure that it's truthful?
Absolutely. And see, what happens is, what you're doing by doing that exercise is, it's an exercise, number one, in awareness, acute awareness. Because what happens is you're acutely aware of what comes out of your mouth. You're acutely aware of what you tell yourself internally. Well, people by nature are not acutely aware of what comes out of their mouth, and they're not acutely aware of what they're telling themselves. There's no acute awareness around it. So the tendency is to do what is socially acceptable, which is lying. That has become socially acceptable. And it's gone many steps past that. It's been normalized. In corporations, lying is accepted behavior, but what's much worse is lying is expected behavior. Now, it's not in all corporations, but there is a very high percentage of companies and corporations where it is a requirement.
So, could you help us with a clear distinction between honesty and truth?
Well, I'll give you this part. All right, honesty is clear cut. All right, that's why I say there's no such thing as a white lie. So honesty is a very clear cut thing. You are either honest or you are not honest.
So if I go into the grocery store and I give the cashier a $20 bill for a $10 purchase,
Yes.
and she gives me back $15,
Yes.
and I look at that and say, wait a minute, that's wrong.
Yes.
Okay, that's being honest.
That's
Or
correct.
if I don't give that back and say, yippee, I just got $5 more.
And I am telling you, Steve, this just happened to me a month ago, and it happens to me quite often. I was in a Walmart. I bought 3 items. One item was $1.43. One item was $14.50, and one item was $30 or $31. I stacked the 3 items on the counter. One of them was just a garden hose fitting, one of them was a pair of shorts, and the other one was an SD card that cost $30. I set it on the counter. The cashier, I watched the cashier scan and fold the shorts in half and put them in a bag. So the 2 other items were folded into the shorts. I walked out to my car. It was quite a distance. It was half a city block away. I got out to the car. I looked at the ticket because something didn't feel right. I looked at the ticket, and the ticket was, the total price on the ticket was $15 and something. And I went, okay, that's not right, because the SD card was $30
Yeah.
plus tax. So what did I do? I immediately turned around and walked in the store. And as soon as the guy saw me walking in the store, I said, yeah, you made a mistake on the ticket. Well, he instantly thought, which is common,
That he overcharged you.
that he overcharged me. That's correct. He instantly felt guilty.
Yeah.
He felt bad. And I said, I want you to know that you left the SD card off the ticket, and the SD card was $30 plus sales tax, which would have made it like $33. And I said, I came back in to pay you the $33. Now, I don't know how many people do that, but I'm just going to guess. I'm going to guess if you get to your car with a free $32 or $33 item, I would guess that most people would think they won. They scored. They got a free
Or
SD card.
they may not think
right?
that they won, but they may think, well, I'm not going to now take the time to walk back in, get this all done, and then walk back out. that's probably pretty common thought as well.
There's some other pieces to that too. People go, oh, it's Walmart.
Yeah.
They won't miss $33.
That's correct.
So I just researched this. I just did this a month ago. Walmart, just Walmart alone, Walmart stores lose $2 billion a year in shoplifting. That's
Wow.
two with a B.
Wow.
$1 billion a year. Now, that's called cognitive dissonance. That's the human justifying the action. Walmart makes millions of dollars. They're not going to miss $32, okay?
Right.
It's just cognitive dissonance. But I have to tell you, when it comes to those moves, making those moves like that, what you're doing, you have a thing called a conscience. And you're either making deposits into the strength of your character and conscience, or you're making withdrawals. So had I have gotten the car and drove away, I'd have made a withdrawal. Guess who knew I did it? Me.
You.
Me. I
Right.
knew it. Now, every time you do that, which is a whole nother subject, every time you do that, you are compromising your physical immune system. You can research this all you want. Every time you do that, you compromise your immune system. Every time. Now I'll go back to the word truth. So we got honesty, being honest. Everybody knows what being honest is. Now we'll go to the word truthful. Well, there's an interesting dynamic with the word truth, because people take it and they do things like, well, there's my truth, and there's your truth, and there's that person's truth. And I go, now wait, stop.
It's
Stop.
only truth.
Okay? Stop. My truth and your truth and their truth and their truth, that's called my opinion, your opinion, and their opinion. That's what that's called. Because truth is based on fact, all right? It's not based on opinion. It is based on fact. So, if you're in a courtroom, and I'm not going to tell you that courtrooms are the most just places anymore, but if you're in a courtroom and you're sworn in to testify, there is what's called the truth. And it's not your truth, okay?
Right.
It is the truth, backed up by facts. But I have a lot of people play that game with me. They go, well, the things you're saying are your truth. No, the things I'm saying are facts, and they're backed up by data.
So, for example, there are certain universal laws, like the law of cause and effect. I mean, it's truth.
The law of cause and effect and the law of compounding is what? Those are two major laws that control the universe we live in, and no one has immunity. Nobody has immunity. I don't care how much money you have. Bernie Madoff had no immunity. Lance Armstrong didn't have immunity. Ken Lay didn't have immunity. He was the CEO of Enron. Nobody has immunity. I mean, you can't beat the laws of the universe we live in. You can think you can.
It seems
but
like
you
a
can't.
few people are beating it at the moment.
Well, but here's what you have to take into consideration.
Right.
You have to take into consideration what we perceive from the outside world,
That's
what
true.
we perceive about people, that they're winning,
Yeah.
okay? They're winning big because they have 7 houses and private jets and multiple Rolexes, and they're winning, all right? That's our perception. But what we don't know what actually goes on inside that person. We only know what they project to the outside world. That's all we know. We don't know what goes on inside. And here's what I'll tell you. There's a thing called the 5 regrets. The 5 regrets are from Hospice International. They are not specific to one demographic of people. They're specific to all demographics of people. Okay? So, the 5 regrets. I wish I would have had the courage to tell people exactly how I feel. I wish I would have been true to myself rather than everybody else. I wish I would have spent more quality time with my family and friends. Number 4, I wish I wouldn't have worked so long and so hard, especially at things I didn't want to do. And number 5, you will remember this forever. Number 5, I wish I would have given myself permission to be happy. Now you notice in that Hospice International 5 Regrets, there isn't anything about being a trillionaire, a billionaire, or a millionaire. There's nothing in there about a Mercedes, a Rolex, or a trip to Hawaii. But these are the things that people share in the last moments of their life, okay? So they don't regret winning the not winning the lottery.
So this is really important stuff because we haven't even gotten through the whole formula yet, but we're
No.
talking about the elements of being happy. So again,
Yeah.
just as a recap for a second, if you're not forgiving yourself and forgiving others, you're not going to be happy.
That's
if,
correct.
If you're not honest and you're not truthful, you can't be happy because it's going.
That's
You may
right.
seem like you're happy for maybe an instant, but in reality, you're not happy at all.
Well, and I will add some clarity to that. In the mental health industry, right, there's a spectrum. It's got 2 ends. On one end of the mental health spectrum, you have abandonment issues, you have personal insecurities, and you have codependent issues. All right. Now, in the middle, you have a whole bunch of things, bipolar, OCD. Then when you get to the far other end, you have psychopaths and sociopaths. All right. Psychopaths and sociopaths don't have a conscience. All right. So they don't feel what other people feel because they have no conscience. So lying and cheating and stealing, they have no remorse. So they have no emotions around any of that stuff. That's why you have to be very cognizant. It's the fastest growing, those 2 disorders are the fastest growing mental disorders on planet Earth. Sociopathy and psychopaths. They're growing faster than any other grouping. So when you cross paths with those people, they are not going to respond the way that you would respond if you have strength of character and strength of conscience. They're going to respond in a very different way.
I've been taught that if you are associated in any way with a person like that, with any of those mental disorders on that
Yeah.
opposite end, there's only one solution.
Yes, there's one solution.
One solution, and that solution is to disconnect.
That is an absolute solution too. That is not an adjustable solution or a maybe or maybe not solution. That is an absolute. If you cross paths with a sociopath or a psychopath, they're going to do what's called, they're going to gaslight you, which means they're going to make you feel bad about everything you do and say, because their goal is to make you feel less than whole, and their ultimate goal is to eliminate you. That's their ultimate goal, is to eliminate you. So
I think most of the people watching this will understand the law of cause and effect, but
Yeah.
maybe the law of compounding is a little bit confusing. So
well,
would you?
I'll give you a minute on the law of cause and effect. So as I go around and I interview people, and I did it for 25 years, I noticed something very interesting. I noticed that most people, not all people, most people, manage the effects of their life. They do not manage the cause. And when I say that, they go, I don't even know what you mean by that. What do you mean by managing cause or effect? Well, when you were a child, that's where original cause came from. So original cause came when you were a child, and it came between being conceived and typically being 5 or 6 years old. So you are going to manage whatever cause you developed. And there's 2 causes. There's low self-worth and healthy self-worth. So you either develop them when you're a child or you don't. And predominantly speaking, there's not an overabundance of children who are from 1 to 5 years old who have healthy self-worth. So what they do, and this is unconscious, by the way, they go through their life and they manage the effects of low self-worth.
But Gary, part of that is people are not taught
Correct.
what is cause that they can influence versus the cause that they cannot. We're not taught how to deal with
Well,
causes of feelings that we have nothing to do with. I mean,
Well-
that we can't do anything about. Let me put it that way.
I'll take it a step farther. In the last big presentations I did, one was in New Jersey, one was in London, and I asked the audiences, I said, raise your hand and tell me 2 or 3 of the foundational 20 traits of healthy self-worth. Just tell me 2 or 3. Raise your hand and tell me 2 or 3. Now, when I was in this country in New Jersey, no one in the room could give me one. When I flew to London, the London audience, 3 or 4 or 5 people gave me 1 or 2. Then I did a presentation in Orlando. It was a day or 2 after the horrific nightclub, Pulse nightclub
Oh, yeah.
situation. And I asked the same question, and only one person in the room could give me 1 trait of healthy self-worth. Now I want you to consider this. Somebody asks you to make a pan of brownies, and the pan of brownies has 20 ingredients, and you have no earthly idea, or you have one idea of what the ingredient is, and maybe it's chocolate, all right? But you have no clue what the other ingredients are. How could you possibly make brownies? Well, if you don't know what the ingredients are, or the traits to healthy self-worth, how in the world could you possibly practice them if you don't even know what they are? And why would you not know who they are? Because public schools don't teach the traits of self-worth.
Nobody teaches it.
No, it's
They don't. They don't.
It's not taught. It's not taught. It's not taught in the workplace. It's not taught in entertainment. It's not taught on the news. It basically isn't taught anywhere. You have to seek it out. And I tell people all the time, look, when I was in high school, I had 0 self-worth. If one teacher would have drawn a line on a chalkboard and put 10 traits of low self-worth and 10 traits of high self-worth on the chalkboard, I can tell you right now, my life would have been completely different, because I would have had a choice to make a great pan of brownies or make something